and welcome everyone who is taking part in this interview. So I'm here with the lovely Kirsten Neuschaffer, who is a skipper, a around the world adventurer, and much, much more. I have been very impressed, by the way, Kirsten, just by I only knew so much about you before the interview. I did some research, obviously, for the questions, and what I found out has been quite interesting, I will say. Your life seems a grand one, if I might say so myself.
Well,
So
thank you, Colin.
yeah, no problem at
Nice
all.
to be part of your interview.
Yeah, we are glad to have you here. Thank you so much for taking the time. Genuinely, it means a lot. And I mean, I know you've been on interviews before, but regardless of that, our purpose is to spread messages of hope, of passion to the rest of the world, of dedication to achieving the things that are really meant to be in one's life, so to speak, amongst many other things. But that's, at least when it comes to the interviews, that's how we focus on it. Yeah,
Very
so
cool.
just as a start off, right? You said, or sorry, in some of your previous interviews, you have mentioned that you started sailing already when you were a child. You sailed dinghies, if I'm not mistaken. What age was that started, and did you have any inspiration from your parents?
Yeah, I think I must have probably had the opportunity to sail a dinghy on the Hartbeespoort Dam when I was maybe around 8 or so, because I grew up inland. And I knew then already the few occasions that I got to do it that I really enjoyed it. I loved being on and in the water, and anything to do with water was my kind of thing as a child already. And yeah, certainly, my parents encouraged us to do lots of outdoors activities. My dad had a great dream of sailing, which he didn't manage to live, but he talked a lot about it. So I think
Mm.
all these little things start in childhood already,
Okay,
you know.
yes, yes. Brought up in the atmosphere of the sailing, so to speak.
Oh yeah.
All right. And there
Yeah.
was no specific inspirations that you had besides your dad talking about the sailing.
I mean, I loved all the tales of adventure, even when I was a child. I loved reading about Shackleton and Amundsen and all those
No,
people
yes.
that went up to high latitudes and the poles and that kind of thing. So I really had this sort of desire to explore. And I had a group of friends who really loved doing outdoor stuff. So we go hiking and camping and do bicycle tours. And one of them had a little Hobie cat that he'd trailer down to the Haysup with like Hartbeespoort Dam every so often. And once we even went all the way down to Maputo and we sailed across to Inyaka Island.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, it was really part of the upbringing, I think,
Mm, mm,
really, that made me start a dream of wanting to do these things later in life.
mm. Yeah, so these things do, right? They start small, in little increments, and then they just grow until the vision is grand.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
very much how it goes.
All right, all right. No, that's awesome. It's awesome to hear. It's always good to have people with you and around you who can feed that dream as well, not those that are necessarily against what you are wanting to do. That's just, yeah. In these
Exactly.
days,
And
yeah.
encouraging is always a good thing, it really builds people up, especially when you're a kid.
Mm,
So
mm.
yeah.
No, it's true, definitely. I mean, I I will say I would probably took a bit of a different path on this side because I was very much um told by my parents a few times not to do things, not to
Mhm.
do things because they didn't want me to do them. I did them anyway, and it worked out for me. So it was encouragement
Maybe
is nice, but yeah.
that's some of the reverse psychology of it,
No,
because
that's
I mean, I
probably
also
true.
had my parents wanting me sometimes not to do the things I wanted to do, purely because they were worried about the safety aspect of
Mm,
it,
mm.
and then you sometimes had to go ahead and do it anyway without them knowing or against their will or whatever it was. So,
Exactly, exactly. It's like you got to experience it
yeah,
yourself. You got to experience it yourself.
yeah. Mhm.
All right, so you carrying on, right? So your Golden Globes race finished in September of 2022, if I'm not mistaken. Um,
It actually started in
so,
September of
sorry,
22 and I finished at the end of April 23.
23. Yes, okay, sorry, yes, my bad.
All right.
And since then, what have you been spending your time doing?
Well, it's funny because I've been really busy, but I can't concretely say what I've exactly been doing. But I've been doing a lot of traveling and a lot of talks and a lot of interviews and a lot of sharing of the experience because I had a lot of people that helped me to get to the start line. Obviously, a campaign to do a around the world race isn't cheap, so you need funding and you need help and you need expertise and when I look back, it took so many people and friendships and just people random gestures of kindness to get me to the start line. So I've felt over the last year now that it's a little bit of payback time. It's time to share the experience where there's interest and yeah, and so it's been kind of a quite a busy year of traveling and talking.
Okay, okay, nice, nice. Yeah, I was wondering because yeah, what does an award-winning skipper do once they have done their thing, you know? They
Yeah,
obviously go
I
and
mean,
talk about
if
it.
I had my choice, I'd be out sailing a lot more. But I was also away for about 4 years, running the campaign to get to the start line and then the actual race. So you kind of come back from something like that, and
Hmm.
you've got all the responsibilities waiting back home for you that you have to catch up on as well.
Fair
So
enough, fair enough. And yeah, when you're out on the ocean, it's not so much a thing of wondering about the responsibilities back home. It's more doing what I need to do now, and yeah.
exactly, you focus on the task at hand. So
Yeah,
yeah.
100%, 100%. Okay, no, that's awesome. I have been fortunate enough to attend one of your talks, and you are a good public speaker, I will say that
Oh,
much. So
thank you.
I can only
Thank you.
imagine. Although, have you been repeating essentially the same core premise in these various talks, or has it been different?
Pretty much because the boat doesn't get faster or the sea's stormier already from one talk to the
Yeah.
next. So I mean that's essentially what I'm doing is I'm sharing my experience of getting to the start line and then the actual race
Hmm.
getting to the finish line. So
Okay.
it's
Okay.
pretty much the same. I mean it depends on who the audience is. If like when I did the talk at Gordon's Bay Yacht Club, I'm
Hmm.
speaking to sailors, I can focus more on the technical aspects, and the refit aspects and what do I know. And then if it's a totally different crowd of people, there may be other aspects like the mental resilience or whatever it takes to do something like that. So varied to a degree of to match the audience.
100%. Yeah, no. So for any future public speaking enthusiasts, it's a good point to take in mind there, or to keep in mind there, is to know your audience and play to their interests. Yes, 100%. All right, all right. And so you say that's what you've been busy with the last 4 months or so.
Yeah, roughly. And it's of course if I travel somewhere, I try and make the best of going to a place. It seems a pity to fly a long distance and then do a couple of talks. So then, like I've just come back from Europe and it was winter there, so it was a good chance to, go and spend a few days on the ski slopes and that kind of thing. So yeah, I'm definitely building some fun stuff into it in between,
No,
doing
that's good.
hikes and yeah.
No, I'm
Mm,
glad to hear it. You got to treat yourself as well. You can't just, it's not just all about work. Come on now.
for sure.
All right. So, um, one thing that I have also seen you talk about, both at the Gordons Bay Yacht Club and in the previous interview, you've also mentioned it, is your how you would essentially during the race as well, you would often jump off off of your boat and kind of swim away, get a little bit of a distance between yourself and the boat. Um, which, I mean, some people might think that to be ludicrous. They would think you would want to stay on your boat. Um,
I,
but
I
to
mean, the principle is that you do want to stay on your boat at all times. So I mean, when I did do that every now and again, but I only did it when there was no wind and the boat wasn't moving. And you do it under very controlled
yeah,
conditions. So for example, you lock your rudder over to one side so that it can't move, so that if the wind comes up for any reason, the boat's not going to go anywhere. It's gonna
yeah.
the rudder's gonna drag or it's gonna go in a circle. So it sounds maybe more scary than it actually is. But yeah, it's a fun thing to do. And like I say, I like being in the water as well under
Mhm.
controlled conditions. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, you are a water baby after all. Yeah, but the reason I bring it up is just because it makes me think that you and correct me if I'm wrong here, but you seem to have quite a deeper connection with nature. You are passionate about it. Is it something you find yourself often drawn towards? Are you more inclined to be doing so?
Yeah, definitely. You know, I know that when I'm in nature, I'm in my happy space.
Mm.
So I don't mind going to cities and, you know, experiencing all the culture and the
Mm.
life that people live in cities, but only to visit and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
get away again and get back out into nature. And that is where I'm at my happiest and where I'm the most inspired. So I try to spend as much time as I can in nature. And I guess that's why I chose my job as a sailor.
Yeah.
Because yeah, it wasn't a bad spot for someone who likes being in nature and being on the sea.
No, 100%. That's awesome. That's really, really nice. Um, I, yeah, it's something, especially with the world being as digital as it is nowadays, there's just something about getting away from all of this electronics and just being able to just, especially like I know you like your ocean. The ocean would probably be quite similar if you're like quite far in, depending on the wind and that. But you know, when you're on top of a mountain, there's just not a also when there's like almost no wind, or even if there is wind, regardless, you can barely hear anything at all. And it's just that
Mm.
you realize how much noise there is actually in the cities and all of that, that you just kind of tune out. But when you're far away, it's just that serenity of that silence is
Mm.
breathtaking.
Or or you hear different noises. For example, if you can hear the sea, it's a nice noise, or a stream running, or crickets and birds and
Mm.
insects and stuff. For me, those kind of noises are really soothing. You know, it's kind of heals the soul a little bit when you can get away
No
from the
doubt,
other.
no doubt. Yeah. And are you a fan of any, let's say, like meditation practices by any chance?
Um, you know, I don't consciously go and sit and meditate, and I probably should, because it's a thing I do actually really respect and really believe is a good practice to do. I haven't done it enough, or I haven't actually cultured the discipline to do it. But you know, for example, I love swimming because I find that every breath you take is obviously a conscious breath.
Yeah.
And I'll just zone out and my mind will become blank, whether I'm swimming in the sea, which I prefer, but even if I'm swimming in a pool, I'll be counting the laps. So suddenly I'm not thinking about anything anymore. I'm just thinking about the next stroke and the next breath.
Mm.
So I often find that I can find a type of a meditation in sport, but I do think that, you know, I should really start doing more of the meditative stuff. But for example, I love going down to the beach most mornings and just stretching a little bit and watching the horizon, and yeah, just having that little disconnect time before I start my day.
No, 100%. I mean, yeah, I was just curious, because I mean, obviously sailing in general can be there are definitely some stressful times, let's say that much, with storms and such, and it can come out of nowhere quite often. So I was just curious as to how you handle the stress of your occupation and also just stress and fear and things like that in general. If you have a method worked out for yourself, if you know yourself well enough to know this is how you're going to react. So, okay, I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to take 3 breaths, for example, or whatever. People have their
Yeah.
different methods.
Well, you know, one thing at sea, and I guess in many instances in life, is when there's something urgent at hand, like a storm, and you have to react, or a dangerous situation where you have to react fast, but without panicking. You need to keep a very clear mind.
Mm.
Maybe it's something you can practice, you know, just by the years that I've spent, you know, at sea,
Mm.
you kind of have a natural reaction to these kind of things. But I do often say to myself, keep calm, and I'm quite good at keeping calm and think quickly and think clearly. And then, you know, when you're at sea, what's often far more stressful is when you don't have wind. Because when
Mm.
you've got a storm and there's situations to deal with, you're busy. You're busy doing something the whole time. But when you've got no control over it at all, because there just is no wind and you have to sit and wait, that's when it becomes difficult. And that's when I find
Mhm.
it helps to actively like tell yourself not to get negative, because it's easy to sit there and say, oh, this is boring and I'm not getting anywhere and I'm not going to be able to win the race anymore because I'm stuck here now and this could take forever, is to just drive away those negative thoughts and say, no, stop. I don't even want to listen to myself thinking in that manner. And then what helps a lot is to look around and say, but it's still beautiful, because you're still surrounded by the ocean, you're still surrounded by nature. And those are exactly those instances when I jump off the boat and go for a swim, to get that little bit of distance. And also, I find if you're stressed, I'm not talking like in a particular situation, but say you're going through a phase in life that's stressful or something like that, a great de-stressor is exercise. So even just jumping off the boat for me and swimming, like sprint swimming 50 or 60 meters, and then stopping and looking back at the boat, and you're a little bit out of breath, you've got your cardiovascular system going, it helps. All those little things help, in my opinion. So
Okay, interesting. So what I'm hearing is the importance of the mindset itself, telling yourself, consciously putting yourself, or consciously not trying to overwhelm yourself with what is happening, but in a sense, walk yourself through the process slowly, one step at a time, without trying to negatively overwhelm yourself. And then furthermore, something else that is helpful, or two things that are helpful, would be the exercise, as you mentioned. It's the overriding of your cardiovascular, or no, sorry, of your autonomic nervous system. No,
it might be.
Sorry, I can't quite remember now. But yes, the point I'm trying to make is that when you're engaging your physical circuitry of your body, it tends to override your mental state.
Yeah, I think so. And it it probably releases serotonins and stuff like that that just make you feel better anyway. So you come out of that and you're like, oh, it's not as bad as I thought it was 10 minutes ago before I started doing a bit of exercise. It just, like you say, it takes your mind off it, and and it just makes you, a mind and body is always closely linked. So if you're feeling good in your body, you're feeling better in your mind, and vice versa. So yeah.
No, 100%. I like the key term that you used there is, it's not as bad as I thought it was. One of my personal favorite quotes is, what do you call it? We suffer more in thought than we do in reality. In most cases, I would say that's generally true, because we do tend to catastrophize much more than is beneficial. Well, if it is beneficial at all, another thing entirely. But
and I mean, we also fear a lot of things that are only in our minds. Like we fear, what if this happens? If I do this, maybe this will happen to me. Or if I go and hike in the rain, maybe I'm going to fall off a cliff and die, or something really, hypothetical like that, that there's a vague possibility that it maybe could happen, but the chances are it's not going to happen. And you're sitting there in the moment all worried about it, when it hasn't happened, it isn't happening, and it might never happen, so.
Yeah, no, the mind can play tricks quite often. But one thing I also wanted to ask you was, because you've obviously been sailing for quite a number of years now, and so I was wondering, do you now, when you are on your boat, do you still feel to a certain degree certain bouts of inexperience, if I could say it like that, in a sense of you can't always be comfortable on the boat as a result of things that are happening? I mean, in general, the more you do something, the better you get at it, the more comfortable you become in doing it. Is that the same for your sailing, do you think?
Well, for sure. I think, like you say, anything you do a lot of, that you practice of, the more comfortable and the more confident you become at it. And experience at sea really counts for a lot, because there's so many different variables and combinations of different variables that you can encounter at sea. So the more time you spend out there, the more of these things you're going to see, the better understanding you're going to have of how to react and respond to those kind of conditions. So, I mean, you definitely do get more comfortable, and even, if you've, for me, for example, if I've been on land for many months and I haven't sailed, that first step, leaving port again, is a little bit of, we're going back out into the unknown. And then you get into the rhythm, and then things start becoming comfortable again. But I mean, that is the thing that I love about being at sea, is every time you go out to sea, you see something new, or you experience something new. You might see some of the same things and experience some of the same things again, but you'll probably see and experience something new again as well. And that's what keeps it fresh and challenging.
Okay, yeah, no, there's beauty in that, right? I understand that too, because I mean, there's no circumstance or situation that's exactly the same. So even if you do encounter something that you have previously, the experience as a whole is not going to be identical, because there are various other things that are different and that have played into where you are and why you were doing it and things like that.
Sure. And I mean, I think, being at sea is obviously not always comfortable, but a lot of adventures or things we do aren't necessarily comfortable. And we don't do them because they're comfortable. We do them to leave our comfort zone and push ourselves to a new limit. So yeah.
No, I'm in agreement with you on that one. Yeah. Another thing I do actually just want to mention, just out of interest's sake, is a comparison that I want to make between the sailing, as you said, when you first, as you first step onto the boat again after a while of being a landlubber, as they say. Yeah, going back onto, you have a little bit of fear, a little bit of and anticipatory anxiety. And to me, that's actually very, very comparable to playing music, actually. Interestingly enough, not so much on your own, that's something else, but as a musician, whenever I've played live, it's exactly that same type of thing as you mentioned. It's always that very first little bit. As soon as you like step onto the stage, you're a bit nervous and you're like, okay, who's up?
Yeah.
Calm down. And then as soon as
And I guess it's something you never, and you never really get over it. It always is there. And maybe it's good, it keeps things on the edge of
Exactly.
excitement.
But then as soon as you start playing and you're in the grip of it, then it just melts away and you're just busy with your thing. And I'm assuming that's what you were getting. Yeah. All right.
That's very interesting.
So so what I wanted to ask as well was based on your mentioning of the what did you say, 4 years that you took in trying to set up, essentially, to get to the starting line of the Golden Globes.
Yeah, the whole process with the race was about 4 years, but the prep was the best part of 3 years. So the preparation, getting to the start line was longer and more difficult than the actual race. And there is there's a bit of a saying when it comes to sailing races, sailboat races, especially the long offshore ones, is that the race is won before you leave the dock.
Yes.
Because it's all in the preparation.
Okay.
It's so important.
So that actually, that actually kind of melds into my next question, which I was going to ask. But before I do get into that, I saw that you had not only a PayPal account, but also a GoFundMe set up for the event, again, as you said, so you could get the funds and that. What other methods of support were you able to
Well, I had a few. One of them was to make a whole lot of debt.
Oh, yes, of course.
And then the other one was to use a lot of my own savings, the majority of my own savings. And then the other one was that I did eventually, but only once I was far enough into the campaign and I had established a certain amount of credibility that people didn't think I was just talking and saying that I was going to do it, but that they could say, okay, she's already got a boat and she's already prepared this far and she's already done this, that, and the next thing, that we do believe she stands a chance of even getting to the start line and maybe later on of even having some measure of success in getting to the finish line. So by that point, it became easier to start asking, not easier, it was still difficult, but then I started getting some corporate sponsorships. They were small-ish, but every little bit helps, just like every
Mm.
little bit of a donation that, you know, someone donates 200 Rand or something like on GoFundMe, every little bit helps if there's
Mm.
going to be a lot of people like that donating. So the smaller corporate sponsorships, they really helped, you know, like one of them was $30,000, which
Wow.
is a lot of money, but
Yeah.
it's only a portion of what you need for a race like that. And then the other thing is that, businesses would maybe donate gear, or they wouldn't charge me full prices. They'd give me massive discounts and that kind of thing. Or people would offer services like, when I was kind of stuck in Canada during COVID, someone gave me their shed. Initially, they said they'd charge me rent for the shed, but then they didn't even charge me rent, and other people would come and do work, and they would only charge me for half the hours they've put in or something like that. So there were many, many different little ways that people helped me, or that I was ultimately able to get it all together.
Okay. Okay. That's beautiful to me. I mean, that's
Yeah.
it's also something that I did pick up on when I was doing research was in some of the previous articles, they also mentioned the fact that you did receive help from people who then either didn't charge you or, just helped you free, well, just, yeah, helped you with whatever it was that you needed at that time, didn't expect anything in return
Yeah.
or anything like that. I think that's just, yeah, I just think that's honestly so beautiful that they are, that people are still willing
Yeah,
to.
it made it very special, really, because it became this incredible journey of friendship, where I knew that those people were helping me because they wanted to, and because they thought it was a cool project, and because they wanted to follow it and see it be a success. Same as the Gordons Bay Yacht Club. I mean, they did a big fundraiser for me,
Mm.
things like that, where people just, you know, or someone offered me 100 jars of homemade food. That's a huge amount of work. That's a lot
Yeah.
of ingredients. It's just a random act of kindness where they don't want anything in return. They don't want me to publicize them, or they don't want advertisement out of it or anything. It's just like a gesture of goodwill.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, but to do that in order so that somebody else might help or might be able to achieve their dream is just, yeah.
Hmm.
Oh.
That's very cool. It really is.
Humanity, the faith in humanity has been restored, as they say. Yeah. All right. So the Golden Globes race, right? It is modeled after the Sunday Times Golden Globes race back in 1968, if I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken. And it essentially it's a retro race. And for those of you who are not familiar, it means essentially that there is no modern boating technologies. I also don't think you're not allowed to use any boat that's been made after 1988.
Yeah, designed after 1988. So you
Yeah.
could have built one new, but the design would have had to predate that era. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yes. Yes. That and then yeah, no modern tracking technologies. So it's all celestial navigation and all of that type of thing.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
again, just makes it that much more impressive that you managed to not only participate but become the victor. Truly, well done. And so my question though is more just in the whole process of your refitting of Minnehaha, which is your Cape George 36 that you used for the race. What was the most stressful task of that whole process, would you say?
I mean, the whole refit was kind of stressful because, as a lot of boat owners will know, when you start fixing things, you often have to break things to fix things. And when you start doing that, you open up these cans of worms, and you just find more and more and more problems. And that's exactly what happened to us. I knew when I'd bought Minnehaha that she had a potential few problems, but they were the type of things that you'd only discover if you did so-called destructive surveying, where you actually have to break something open and check
Oh yes.
if it's rotten and something, that kind of thing. And we then did land up finding all sorts of possible problems. And the refit just became a lot bigger and a lot longer and a lot harder than we thought it would.
Mm.
And of course, that goes on your own labor efforts that you're putting into it and the time that it takes, but it also takes up more finances. It puts you under more stress, and in terms of getting to the start line, because the clock's ticking and you've only got a limited amount of time to do everything that you have to do. And the list of things you have to do is long. Apart from refitting the boat, you've got to, know how to jury rig your boat. So that's something you've got to try out. You've got to do qualifying miles on your own boat. I had to practice the celestial navigation because I'd learnt it, but I'd never used it because modern day sailors use GPSs. So the list of things I had to do was really big. So I think the deeper I got into the refit, the more tired I became, because it was months and months of ongoing working every single day, 7 days a week, sometimes till 2, 3 in the morning. And you start to get to a little bit of a burnout at some point where you think, I'm not going to get to the top of the mountain of this workload anymore. And then you just have to kind of step back a little bit and say, okay, stop thinking about the whole procedure and the final goal. Just prioritize and do the most important thing. So you're just taking it a step at a time. And when you take a step at a time, before you know it, you're actually at the top of the mountain. So yeah.
100%. Yeah, it's I can only imagine the amount of effort that you guys had to put in to get Minnehaha running, and in, what do you call it, qualifying shape. Truly, again, very impressive. And you did mention also, which was leading into my next question again, I was going to ask how prepared you were for the celestial navigation in general. And as you mentioned, it's not something that you did much of, so you had to go and do some practicing with that. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, and I mean, I had a lot of practice with it then, because it wasn't planned, as many things weren't, because I'd never done a campaign like this. So you're kind of making things up as you go along. But I landed sailing about 15,000 nautical miles even before the race started.
Wow.
And I'd sailed the majority of that with celestial navigation. So by the time I got to the start line, I felt very prepared. I felt that I had done everything I needed to for my boat, that my boat was good and strong. And I'd felt that I had a good grip on the celestial navigation. And because I'd done such a long distance already on my own, when the race, when we sailed over the start line, it was like, oh, well, I'm used to this. Here we go again.
Yeah.
So, I think if people say to me, why do I think I was successful? Then I honestly have to say is because I put my heart and my soul and every little bit of effort that I could into the preparation.
Oh, okay. That's awesome. Really stellar to hear. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to actual preparations for races like these, what are the most concerning besides, let's say, the celestial navigation?
I think the most concerning and the most expensive part is, of course, getting everything that you need for your boat. So firstly, all the labor that might have had to be done, the materials that you need for that. And then there's 101 other things that the race requires you to have, like, 2 tracking devices and 2 satellite phones for emergencies, and flares and all this emergency equipment.
Wow.
And there's certain things that they require you to do, like put in watertight bulkheads in case you hit a thing that your boat doesn't sink. And so ticking all those boxes is difficult, but the actual prep on the boat is the most expensive and the most stressful. At least it was for me, because I already felt comfortable at sea and with sailing. I was convinced that I'd master the celestial part of things, because I thought to myself, if other people have done it, I'm going to be able to do it as well. And what's more is I'll probably have 7 or 8 or 9 or more months to practice it while I'm out there sailing. So it was really the things where you had to say, what do I absolutely need to have done and need with me before I leave that dock? Because once I leave the dock, there's no going back for it anymore.
Yes, no, that makes sense, because yes. So again, for those who aren't aware, the stipulated in the Golden Globes race rule set is that you are not necessarily allowed to stop anywhere. So if that's why she says that if she's forgotten something, that's it. There's no chance to go back for it. Yeah, no, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So then I was also going to ask, you said you were that you did a lot of planning for it and you felt you were as prepared as you possibly could have been. how important is routine to you in general, and how did the planning factor into that on a daily basis? Let's say, on a daily basis whilst you were busy with the race. Were there times where you had to now quickly say, okay, I had this planned, but this has happened, so now quickly I need to go and switch. I need to go do this. This is more important. I need to do this.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think routine's very important at sea because otherwise one blue day just melts into the next.
Mm.
And you know, a lot of stuff you just have to have a routine. For example, for the navigation, you've got to get the time signal in the morning. You should try and get a morning sight and a noon sight. Then you can get a position on your chart and all that kind of thing. And you know, you've got a routine about writing your logbook and logging your ship's heading and your boat speed and cloud cover and barometric pressure and all that kind of stuff. It's really important to log it. So the routine is you try and log it once every hour. And you know, then you've got other stuff like you've got to eat and sleep and rest and take care of yourself. So that all gets built into the routine, as well as, you know, checking for maintenance issues and doing maintenance issues, attending to them as they crop up. But then, of course, you know, you've got to play along with the weather. So your routine's never entirely the same. You might be up through most of the night because there was a storm or there was some sort of tricky situation you were dealing with, but therefore you might catch up on the sleep during the day, or something breaks. Now suddenly you're going to alter course so that you're on a smoother course and you're going to drop sail so that you can fix the broken thing first because it might be something important. Or if you get notification that one of the competitors' boats has sunk and you're the closest person to go and help them, your goal changes. You change your course, you forget about the race, and you do what's important in that moment. So yeah, I think you definitely need to be very flexible about your routine and about what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And I think it's a good philosophy to have in life as well.
All right. Yeah, no, that makes, again, it is expected. I would say that you would essentially try to handle everything as it comes up. Do that which is most important first, and then, yeah, as you said, the routine with the logging of all the variables that you need to take into account for your direction and navigation and such. So yeah. Carrying on then, I wanted to ask, how did the Golden Globes as as a whole race, how would you say that has shaped the way that you look at the world or sailing nowadays? Has it changed it at all? How have you grown, do you think, from this experience?
I mean, you certainly grow in confidence as to what you're capable of yourself. But it's also it's strange coming back into the real world because you've done this thing that people, you know, say that's fantastic that you did it and you won it and everything else, but suddenly there's a lot of expectations on you as well. You know, like people are kind of waiting for the next big adventure or the next big race or something like that. And then it's the moment where you have to say, well, what is it that I really want to do myself? What are the things that I really have to do? And what are the things that I might be doing because there's an expectation on me? You know, so coming back into normal life on land is probably one of the trickier things after something like that. And you kind of have to reinvent yourself as well, because now for 4 years of preparing and racing, that was my project and that was my goal. And then you sail over the finish line and it comes to a grinding halt, and then you're like, oh well, now I better think of something else, you know. So yeah. But you know, if I learned something, you know, because we're focusing on positive stuff here, something really positive is that people are overwhelmingly good. When I think of how many people helped me and even how much positive feedback and comments and stuff and interest and whatnot that I got even after the race. So I mean, it's been an overwhelmingly positive ride for me all the way, even through the hard and difficult times.
Wow, that's amazing. That truly is incredible to hear. I think it makes it that much more special, you know. That Yeah, not only, again, are you doing something that you care about, it's a dream of yours, and now you have people who are coming up to you, again, giving you that encouragement, saying, inspiration in a sense, saying they believe in you, that they believe that you have the capability to do what it is that you are setting out to do. Yeah, it's just really sweet.
Yeah, and I think the lesson in that is that doesn't matter if you're a sailor or a musician or a rugby player or a scientist or whatever, you should really be following your dreams or trying to do the thing that you're passionate about, because if you like it, it's probably because you're potentially good at it or you want to be good at it. And if you're going to be good at something, you're going to be the best potential human that you can be for perhaps for the people around you as well, you know. Like one could say that it's a pretty selfish thing to want to sail around the world on your own and do this race and fulfill this dream, which yeah, in many senses it is, but it's not necessarily a bad thing, because the results of it weren't bad. You know, you're not hurting anyone and maybe you're inspiring someone on the sideline. So
Yes.
so the point is follow your dreams.
No, that's beautiful. Thank you for that. I think there's a lot of people who need to hear that. It is true that you really, as you say, you know, if you're drawn towards something, there's probably a deeper reason for that. You know, there's something you need to do with it that needs to be expressed through you, that needs to come out of you, that the world needs, and only, well, the way that in which you do it, the world needs that, exactly that, how you do the thing that you do. And a beautiful quote that my old camp leader, I used to be a facilitator at a campsite, he had a beautiful quote saying that the biggest contribution that you can ever make to the world is by being authentically yourself. Like there's no bigger change that you can really.
Yeah, that's very cool. Eh?
It's
It's true.
beautiful.
You should try and be someone you're not, or try and do something that's not your thing. That's a
Yeah.
lovely quote.
No, and it is true. I mean, I've also struggled myself through that, as we all do, you know, with not only culture but society in general, enforcing certain guidelines and certain ways of looking at the world and what is acceptable, what is not. But yeah, that's you can only ever do what you can do. You can only ever be who you are. So might as well do that as best you can.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
Mm. So also it's funny you mentioned that sailing is a selfish thing, or yeah, it could be construed as such. I don't think you can make that claim, seeing as you technically you saved somebody on the water during the process of sailing. So even in your selfishness, you were selfless. So there's something about that. But yeah.
Well, I guess you can never really live entirely without being selfish somewhere here or there, you know. But again, it's not necessarily always a bad thing, as long as you're not, you know, stealing and being greedy and doing harm to other people.
Yeah,
You're
no,
just
no.
living true to yourself. So yeah.
No, I understand. There tends to be a conflation between selfishness as a negative and selfishness as a positive, where you're just, you know what is valuable to you, and that therefore you spend time on that. It's yeah. But anyhow, so out of curiosity, how sociable are you? Because you were 233 days alone. That's quite something.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite sociable, I'd say. I love shall I say, spells of interacting with people and socializing and you know, listening to people and their experiences and learning out of other people's experiences as much as I can, and reciprocally also sharing my experiences. But I also like to have my alone spells where I want to be alone. I want to be alone with my own thoughts so that I can organize them. I want to see wherever I am, if I'm gone on a hike or I'm camping somewhere on my own, I want to see it through my own eyes without anyone else telling me their opinion on how they see things. Yeah, and I want to be alone in nature. So I really go both ways of being a very solitary person and also being a very sociable person.
All right, you got that. I'd say you got that good balance going then, 100%. Not what do you call it? Not being reclusive, but also not being just completely how can I say amalgamated in the social organism. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I mean, I could easily become a recluse, but I think for people who do like solitude, it's important to not allow yourself to become a recluse because I think the most learning you can do on a large scale, is through other people.
Mm.
So if you start becoming a complete and total recluse and spending years and years on your own and not wanting to have anything to do with society anymore, I think you're shooting yourself in the foot. You're cutting out something very important in life because we're humans, we were born social creatures, and you can't really get away from that. So I think it's important to, I think, but on the same token, I think people who are incredibly sociable and don't like being on their own should actually go and discover being on their own and cultivate a liking for it, because that's how you get to know yourself too, through other people, but also through a bit of solitude here and there.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for mentioning that. You raise a very valuable point there, in that again, it's if I could boil it down, it's almost also a comfort zone type of thing. People who are used to being on their own also they've made that a habit and a pattern in their lives. And so yes, it's not necessarily they might enjoy that, but as you said, you by cutting yourself off from it completely, you then stand the risk of losing the experience, the growth, the understanding that can be gained from those social relationships and from the experiences had together. Whereas the person who is very social but never tends to spend time on their own, they will more likely tend to be, how can I say, uncomfortable with their own mind, and the things that they think, and it could do them a lot of good to be able to sit down in seclusion and just not be afraid of those thoughts per se, but just kind of go through them and learn to appreciate your own company. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's very true. There's a certain strength you get out of knowing that you're happy on your own, that you can survive and can even thrive on your own. It's quite empowering. It's like, well, if it doesn't work out or whatever, I'll be okay on my own. But on the same token, if you're, maybe very shy or something, it's also very empowering to learn how to interact with people, because it's also a necessary part of life. So yeah.
100%, 100%. All right. So just one or two more questions before we end off here. It's been wonderful, by the way. I've really been enjoying this conversation. So thank you. So do you have any advice that you would like to give first of all, your younger self, looking back at it now? Is there anything that you would want to tell yourself? Something that you may have wanted to do differently, something that you may have wanted to invest in that you haven't. Not necessarily regrets per se, not that strong, just yeah, any advice that you would want to give your younger self?
I think, looking back, I'm pretty happy with the way things have gone in my life. The one thing I would tell a younger version of myself is that it's not always worth getting too upset or too down about things that go wrong, because sometimes they're blessings in disguise and you might only notice it years later. For example, a thing might have happened that changes the course of your life. You were planning to do this job or these studies or whatever it is, something got in the way and it didn't work out that way, but it might have put you on just as good a path or even better a path. Or something breaks, but therefore something else didn't happen. So what I'd say to myself is, don't sweat the things that go wrong as much as I perhaps did when I was younger, because sometimes there's a reason for it and sometimes it's a good reason.
Kirsten, wow, I genuinely, I cannot be more in agreement with you about what you've just said. What genuinely, the reason I say this as well is because exactly as you mentioned, life happens when you're making other plans, as John Lennon so aptly put it.
Mhm.
And I mean, it's exactly what happened to me. I was busy with psychology studies, for example, and had quite a big car accident. And I've been out of commission for the last 3 years, essentially, from that. And it was only in the last year that not only has my health gotten better, but I've
Mhm.
branched into various other things that I'd never even had an inkling of doing before, like painting, for example,
Mm.
along with the good newspaper who I now work for. So,
Mm.
it really does make sense that we really shouldn't sweat the things that go quote unquote wrong as we might think. We have
Mm.
a conception of life as needing to go this way or that way because we want them to go this way or that way.
Mm.
And then when it doesn't, obviously there's various ways of going about it. But the point is that in a weird way, a life tends to kind of know what it's doing. You
Yeah,
could say it
like
like that.
sometimes you just got to trust it,
Yeah.
which is hard to say when something like what you've just described, you've had a horrible accident and it's cut you out of everything that you were busy doing in your studies and everything, like you're really down mentally and you're really down physically and everything else. So it's hard to say it in those moments to
Mm.
just trust life because it knows what it's doing. But the other thing about those things, and I'm sure you'll know exactly what I'm talking about here, having come out of what you've come out, is that those adversities in life are opportunities to grow
Mm.
in ways that you wouldn't have grown or understood if those things hadn't happened to you. So there is something good to be said about adversity. It's a challenge, it's an obstacle, it's a hard thing to overcome, but it makes you grow.
Hmm. Very, very true. As Mr. Nietzsche would say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Uh,
There we go.
it is very true. I mean, I don't even recognize the person that I was before all of that happened, and I'm glad for it. I'm actually glad for the things that have happened and where I've ended up as a result of it. And I never in my life thought I'd say that.
Mm.
But hey, such is life, C'est la vie. You don't know. You don't
One
know.
of the prizes.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so just the last question I wanted to ask is what's next on the agenda for the first woman winner of the Golden Globes race? Yeah.
Well, I've got very itchy feet. I'd love to, I don't know, go and sail through the Northwest Passage and do all sorts of other interesting expeditions. And I'm hoping, and I'd like to say, no doubt, I will do, more interesting stuff. I don't know if it's going to be races or record-breaking stuff because, I'm usually not very competitive. This was sort of a once-off, and I enjoyed it. Maybe so much that I'd do a different kind of a race again one day. But for now, I'd actually just like to spend a bit of time writing it down. I should have started a long time ago because it's been many months already since the race came to an end, but I'd like to document it for my own good, and writing a big thing down like that's going to take some time. And then, at least I can refer back to it in 10 years' time, or, who knows, maybe I'll make a book of it and catch up a little bit on spending time with my folks. My father's not the youngest anymore. I might not have him for much longer. So I don't actually just want to disappear on some big mission again. I feel like my place is here at least for the next 6 months or something until I've, yeah, digested what I've just experienced and caught up with family and friends and dogs and everything that I have back here at home.
All right, all right. No, that's awesome. Honestly, I hope that I wish you all the best with that venture. I hope that you can enjoy your time at home spent, and then whatever is next, whatever adventure you do plan on going on, I wish you safe travels for it. And if you do end up turning those notes into a book of sorts, please,
Mhm.
I will very likely read it. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much. Well, same to you. I wish you all the best, and yeah, let's see what the future holds.
Indeed. Well, life has its ups and downs, but as one thing you've reiterated many times in this interview, it's just the mindset focusing on what's important right in front of you, and don't sweat the stuff that you think has gone wrong. Life has a way of making things work out if you would trust it. Thank you so
Well,
much.
and well done on spreading, good and inspiring stories. I think we need more of that in the world.
Thank you, Kirsten. We appreciate it. Yeah, onwards and upwards from here, right? For both of us.
Onwards and upwards. Thank you so much, Colin. All the best, eh?
Same to you. Thank you so much, Kirsten. Have a lovely day further, and we'll chat again soon.